Welcome to Father and Son, and welcome to you, Tom, on this Thursday after Easter.
Morning, Dad.
I just wanted to talk a little about Julia Gillard. I mean, she's been to Japan, which is always very friendly. She's been to South Korea and China. Now she's off to the royal wedding.
And she briefly went to North Korea as well. She stepped over the dividing line of the demilitarised zone. And I was a bit frightened that might constitute an invasion by Australia of North Korea, which, well, given that she was talking about the Battle of Kapyong in the early 50s when Australian troops fought off tens of thousands of Chinese troops, I was worried it might start again.
The excerpts of her speech have been very boring. She slowed her speech down quite a lot, but she just talks in the same monotonous tone. Now, the Asians wouldn't pick up what a dreadful sound she makes when she speaks, but this Thursday night she'll be in London for the royal wedding, and she's meeting with the Prime Minister, who's an old Etonian, and Prince Charles for a meeting. They'll pick it up very quickly.
Yes, I think they will. David Cameron, who is the Prime Minister, actually, I was at university with him in England. He's the same age as me, and he was at Oxford when I was there.
What college was he?
I think he was at Balliol. And what's interesting is the head of the British Labour Party. There's two Miliband brothers. I forget. There's David and Edward. And I can never remember which is the head. But the younger one is the head of the Labour Party, and the older one is in the Labour Party as well. The younger one was in the college right next to me, and he did the same course I did and sat his exams at the same time. I met him once, and it was just before the general election in April of 1992. And as a student, he was campaigning very heavily for the then British Labour leader Neil Kinnock. And I said, look, it's bizarre, but I'm actually allowed to vote in this election. There was some rule that even though I was an Australian. He said, oh, who are you going to vote for? I said, I think I'll vote Conservative for John Major, which I did. No one thought John Major had a chance, and he just was aghast that someone my age would do that. Of course, Neil Kinnock lost that election and John Major got in. So funny how history turns around like that.
It's good that I was able to make sure there's only a couple of rules in our household. One, you always do your best. Two, you vote for Carlton. And three, you always vote for the Liberal Party. And you've stuck to it throughout your life.
I remember we had a gardener once who actually was a New Zealander but said he voted Labor. And you sacked him, I think, or threatened to sack him on that basis. Which I remember thinking was a little unfair, saying he just was the gardener.
Yeah, that's right. He can do what he likes. Well, tomorrow night, it'll be Friday night, Carlton are playing the Swans up in Sydney, and the royal wedding will be on. What will you be watching?
Carlton versus the Sydney Swans, although in our household, my now fiancée, I got engaged on my overseas trip, which our viewers may not know, but I mean, her family are all Sydney Swans supporters. Of course, we're all Carlton supporters, and I'm pleased to announce that my daughter is obviously a Carlton supporter.
What about your wife-to-be? That should be a condition of the marriage.
Well,
she changes over.
It's hard to get people to change. I think I respect her more for not changing, even though it'd be good if she married for Carlton. I think tomorrow night we'll have a divided household. But look, many people will be watching the royal wedding, and all the usual suspects have come out. I mean, we've got Republicans saying now's the time we should be thinking about ditching the monarchy. Having said that, if you've watched any of the, I'm sure you don't watch them, the shows like Sunrise and The Current Affair and whatever, all of them have got their hosts over in London. I mean, it's a big thing, this royal wedding for Australians.
I remember the last one was a Friday night, I think, and we were with your mother. We were having dinner in a Carlton restaurant and all watching it in the evening. So it's a lovely time for Australian television. The other interesting thing about it is that the poll came out this week over Easter on republicanism versus the monarchy. And there's been a big dip in the support for Republican, for Australia to become a republic.
Yeah, I think there is, and it's sort of similar with younger people. Like if you ask teenage girls in their 20s these days, are you into feminism? They'll say no, they don't think it's of any interest to them. Curiously, I think the monarchy is the same. I think people are they see it it's a bit of pomp and splendour. It adds something that other countries which are republics don't have. And you know what, Dad? I mean, it doesn't subtract anything. Or what Republicans cannot seem to grasp is that they talk about symbolism and it's so unfair and they're foreigners, this is the king or queen. But the reality is it doesn't affect day-to-day life in any adverse way in Australia. And I think if you're going to say you should change it, you've got to have something better. And the Republicans have never been able to agree on the alternative. And
I've always been a monarchist, but I think it's now at the stage where I would probably vote Republican on one condition, that the way we select our Governor-General, which is the Prime Minister recommending to the Queen,
Yes.
that the Prime Minister select the Governor-General, as he or she does now, and they have exactly the same powers they've got at the moment, which is basically nil unless there's a crisis.
Well, but see, that's the funny thing, because they are nil unless we have a crisis, such as we did in 1975 when the Whitlam government couldn't pass supply and had to be chucked out by Sir John Kerr. But there's actually a lot of reserve powers that traditionally aren't used, but they could be used. And I would just wonder if a more, if you like, republic-minded Governor-General might say, well, you know what, without the guiding hand of the palace sitting above me, maybe I will decide to use these powers. I mean,
well, what sort of thing?
Well, for example, every law that gets passed by the Australian Parliament has to be assented to by the Governor-General acting on behalf of the Queen. Now, it's a formality. I mean, the Governor-General passes it. What if the Governor-General didn't like one of the laws and said, well, you know what, I'm actually the equivalent of a president here. I will not pass this law. It's not very clear what would happen. Now, that doesn't happen because the monarchy knows that, of course, in centuries gone past, that's exactly what the monarchy did. They refused to recognise the authority of Parliament. Yes. The only reason they have changed is because the tradition has changed. But that's when I say if you just substitute it, you would then have to really think about some of those powers, because a lot of those powers aren't used. They are there. And I think it would be concerning if a Governor-General who we thought would have no power suddenly decided that he or she had quite a lot and decided to use it.
Well, in that case, then I'll stick to being a monarchist.
Stick to what you know. It's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what other items are on the map?
Well, there's all sorts of things. I mean, overseas, the world's a complete mess still. Gaddafi's clinging to power. I read an article in the Fairfax Press this morning where someone's saying we have to threaten Gaddafi with invasion, i.e. on the ground. Well, you know, I mean, if that happens, well, we hope it won't, but, you know, it's...
I see, though, the Italians have come into the conflict by providing striking power, along with the French and the English.
Well, that's going to scare a lot of people. The Italian military and the French military don't exactly have a great history of the last century or so.
They don't.
Apologies to any Italian and French viewers that we have. Interestingly, locally, the Anglican Church has come out today. And now, look, you know, up until relatively recently, if you said anything bad about migrants, you were branded a racist. And the baby bonus, which was actually introduced by Peter Costello, was seen as a great thing, you know, $5,000+ for having a baby. The Anglican Church, probably in an environmental cloak, has said, look, there's too many people in Australia, we need to get rid of the baby bonus, like stop Australians reproducing, and reduce the level of immigration. Although they did say they wanted more refugees, that means fewer skilled migrants and fewer family reunions. I'm not sure the church has thought this through, but I was really surprised to see a church...
Well, as a long-standing Anglican as I am, I think it's just sheer nonsense. If we don't keep growing our population, our economy won't grow. You've got to keep doing it. I think it's much better that we have, first of all, children that are born here. I think it's a very good policy. And I support the Labor Party. They came out immediately and said, we're not going to get rid of it. We think it's very important for struggling families who have children.
Well, this is the thing. Look, I've just returned from a holiday in the United States. Unemployment there is 9%. They want to block the borders. No more Mexicans, no more immigrants. And their economy is struggling to grow, although there are signs that it's beginning to improve. But I mean, you know, it's because the Australian economy grows so strongly, which is partly a population issue, that we have much lower unemployment. I can tell you, having seen the two alternatives, I know which side of the fence I'd come down on, and it's the same as you.
You've got to keep growing the population. I think, though, what they ought to do by bringing skilled migrants in, the skilled migrants are critical when we've got job shortages, and we've really got full employment now. But I think if they're going to let these refugees in who are unskilled, I think it'd be a good thing if they had to go and live for 2 or 3 years in the bush, not just populating Melbourne and Sydney and the major cities.
Well, look, we're just about out of time, but I can tell you that's exactly what they did after World War II. Cities and towns in rural and regional Victoria and around Australia got all sorts of migrants. They were told, this is your contract. You come to Australia, you live here for 2, 3, 4 years. That's how the snow U was constructed. Exactly. I think it was a good policy. No reason it can't be done again.
I agree. And just to finish off, it looks like Wednesday is the only day this week when there's no football. That was yesterday, and the next round starts again tonight, and I'll be watching the Blues as well play the Swans instead of the Royal Wedding.
Good.